So, hello, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you are enjoying the summit so far. We're going to continue in this room with our program for this morning with a session that, as Drew said before, used to be called Platforms for Disintermediation, but the disintermediation word is forbidden in program editing because it just takes too long. So this became the platform session. And actually, it wasn't really about disintermediation only, it was about many other things. Those of you who were in the previous session, in the Creative Ecologies one, probably participated or witnessed the discussion about what is the role that this specific kind of agents can play in creating new modes of engagement between citizens and institutions to shape out new kinds of processes. And in a way, this session is not about that, but it will bump into some of the same questions and shape out some of the same problems. It's obvious that in the last few years, in the online world, in the online context, there's a new kind of agents that have appeared that are, in some cases, supplementing, in other cases, replacing the functions and roles that traditional institutions have had in the creative environment, in the world of culture, and in the space between creators and audiences. This panel, we're really happy to be able to say that, I think includes examples and representatives from some of the most important agents that have taken part in this process. We only have 1 hour and we have 3 presentations, and we really believe that a good part of the value of this discussion is going to be in the conversation that we can have after it. So I really encourage you to take note and put out when we open the floor about everything I want to say in this conversation that, as we say, will engage agents like Vimeo, Kickstarter, and the Creators Project. I don't think they need much introduction, but I would be incredibly rude by not introducing them. So the first one of them is Jeremy Boxer. I have to say on a personal note that I've known Jeremy for many years, and he's a veteran of the wars of digital film. He's been actually, I think, part of the history of digital film in one way or another for many, many years. His actual role in Vimeo is as creative director and director also of the Vimeo Festival and Awards. You might not know that Vimeo has actually an event that happens every year and a half, 2 years. And as I said, he's been working in the world of digital filmmaking for many years, both as a creator and also he had links. He was an integral part of an organization that those old enough might remember, also played a very pivotal role in the late 90s to early 2000s, was called Res, that ran a magazine, Res Magazine, and a festival, Res Fest. I'm really, really happy to give over the phone to Jeremy Boxer, and thanks a lot for making it over here, Jeremy.
Thanks, everybody. Well, Jose Luis took care of my first minute of my presentation, so I am going to take you through a little bit of what Vimeo is about. And I know most of you might know who we are and what we do, but I thought that I would give you just a brief little video that we created for partners, and I'll give you a snapshot in 60 seconds of where we are right now.
Several years ago, a small group of passionate filmmakers were looking for an easy way to share their videos online. They didn't find what they wanted, so they built it themselves, the world's best video player. Vimeo was born. The world's best video player attracted the world's best video creators. And they didn't put just any videos on Vimeo. They put masterpieces. Movies that move people. Films that change the world. As more creators put their videos on Vimeo, more viewers came to watch them. What started as a simple sharing tool grew into a platform loved by millions of people. And these weren't just any people. They were nice people. Smart people. People who influenced not just their friends, but creativity around the world. Word continued to spread, and Vimeo became more than a website. It was woven into the fabric of the web. Today, Vimeo is the world's leading creative network with a completely original approach to partnerships. one that enables brands to engage viewers, inspire creators, and shape the future of content and creativity. The story of Vimeo is heading in a fascinating new direction, and you can be a part of it.
So Vimeo is based on 3 core ideas, and we basically created the site to be the best tools for creators to share their work in the highest quality way. And what ended up happening is a huge community was built around that. And so we wanted to embrace this creativity and try and give creators as much control as possible over the way that their work is seen. And we don't have any pre-roll advertising or pop-ups on anything that a creator puts out there, because we believe in kind of the sanctity of the frame and what creators want to put out there in the cleanest possiblest way. Wanted to talk about Vimeo as a concept of a daily film festival. We have a channel called Staff Picks, where our curators curate a handful of films every day. So it's hour by hour, you see new works that are up there. And we try to do something that's very different. What ends up happening is that those films that we pick go into everybody's inboxes that is a registered user, and that's now 15 million people. But that's also 15 million people who are also your peers as creators and who are also just people in the industry. And what that enables is a magical effect that your work gets out to all the right people. So our aim with this was to give attention to works that needed to have attention, elevate them as kind of artwork. Motion graphic pieces, independent music video, and action sports and short films. And our idea here was to lead by inspiration, to aspire the new generation of creators to kind of do their own work. So short films have had a huge renaissance recently, and I think a lot of it is due to online sharing platforms such as Vimeo. And a lot of that comes down to the idea that short films have become a social currency that people want to share with each other. And also their point is easier to get across than longer form films. I want to give you guys some examples of success stories. So James Curran did a animated piece, which was his version of the Tintin title sequence. It was one of the finalists in our festival and awards. But what was the interesting thing was it got picked up by Edgar Wright, who tweeted it, and then Steven Spielberg got a hold of it and sent James a note and basically told him, I don't know what yet for, but James, you're hired. So we thought that was a great note that when we got that in the office. The address is approximate, is by a group called The Theory, and they've used Google Street View to create a animated journey of this beautiful little character that goes across time and space. And what is the most amazing thing about it is that it was a small, very it was a project that you wouldn't see if the online world didn't really exist. And the creators have now been picked up to do a feature film with Sony. How many of you have seen Kane's Arcade? Okay. With all the films, I suggest you see all the films, but especially this one. This one was one of those magical moments. In the first 3 days, it had over 1.5 million of its 4 million views that it has now on Vimeo. But the important thing, again, is that it was about this young boy who built who worked in his dad's shop, who did auto parts, and he built a huge cardboard arcade and came up with this idea of creating these arcades for people to come and play. And a filmmaker stumbled upon it because he broke his car door, and was getting a replacement car door, and went and saw this beautiful thing. And he used all the power of the online world to flash mob people to come and play these games because he was the first customer. So what ended up happening is they put up this video, based off of this afterwards, and they raised, $250,000 for Kane's future tuition fees for college, and as well they created a whole global movement of kids around the world creating cardboard arcades. 271 challenges around the world, and they built a foundation that has now over $350,000 put in by people online. We created the festival and awards as a way of hypercharging what I had just spoke about. We found also that lots of films that had premiered online had basically not been able to go to traditional film festivals because of the usual rules and regulations to do with that. So we kind of flipped the script and only accepted works that had premiered online. So if you premiered at a film festival, we didn't accept you. We really didn't know how many films that we would get, but in our first year we got 6,500 submissions, and in our second time doing it we had 14,500 submissions. And to give you just a general gist, that was about double of what Sundance got in that year. We wanted the event to be a hybrid event of an online event and a real-world event. Because we speak to our community every day, we wanted to do this event every 18 months to 2 years of when it felt relevant to us to do something. And so when we put these things together, we wanted people to meet the people behind the profiles. We wanted people to get together and have a real-world experience from people that they may have just only met online. This happened in New York for the first 2 times, but we're looking at spreading it out into different ideas in the future. The one thing that was interesting for us was to look at the significance that it had on the people who won. The aim of all festivals should be always to help those filmmakers' careers move forward, but by winning the award, we supercharged those videos that were online, and all of the filmmakers from the first year came back as judges, and we did little videos, which you can see on Vimeo, about what's happened to them since then, and everything has happened from feature film campaigns to advertising campaigns, music videos, to their careers completely changing overnight because of their win. This is a still from our awards, which we did we took one of the members of our community, which was Seeper, which we created a projection mapped award show, which I think was the first time that something had been done that way, so that the technology was like a secondary host in the show. So then we wanted to talk a little bit about the art world. So many filmmakers use our site, but also creators such as artists and designers use our site to enable them to show their work and to show what they've been doing. Especially with time-based work, like such as projection mapping, if you don't shoot the work and share it, if you weren't there at that moment in time, the work really doesn't exist for a bigger audience. And the effect that that has impacted on those kind of things has kind of driven to a larger extent. I'm going to speed through this a little bit because I want to give time. So one of the things that we're the most excited by is the use of Vimeo as a distribution tool. One thing that I had heard anecdotally recently was our password-protected links have now overtaken DVDs in the film industry as screeners. And so we took a lot of time to figure out how we were going to enable tools for creators to make money from their work. So we started with TipJar, which was a way for viewers to tip up to $500 for a video. You can do it at any point during the video if you wanted to show your appreciation for the creator. The split is 85% towards the creator of all tips in that kind of way. But then the big thing was to create a new tool. And I'm just going to skip the video that I was going to play for you guys and just tell you about Vimeo On Demand, which actually only launched a couple of weeks ago. Now, Vimeo On Demand is something that is dear to my heart. It's been one of the projects that I've been working on. It is the first open, we believe, viable option for distribution for filmmakers and creators and anyone who wants to release anything online and get paid for it. You can select your price, you can select where it's available in the world, you can select if you're going to do streaming or downloading. you get 90% of the profits. You need a Vimeo Pro account to do this, but after that, you basically can also have a page that exists on Vimeo and takes advantage of the 100 million people that come to the site a month, or you can have it on your site as well, so you can start selling from your site at the same time. So just a quick look to the future. We see beautiful works every day, and so what we wanted to do was to kind of push what we thought was amazing creativity. And we're going to continue to do it with a lot of the tools that are coming out there, but I'm just looking forward to having more questions from you guys to see what's going to happen. Thanks so much.
Yeah. No. Okay. Thanks a lot, Jeremy. And you have 3 minutes that you can use however you see fit. Our next participant is Stephanie Pereira. Stephanie works in this organization that you might have heard of. It's called Kickstarter. And it would probably be a bit of an understatement to say that the impact of Kickstarter in the creative economy in the last 2 years has been felt in many ways, has created, of course, hundreds of pages about these merits, opportunities, and perils. What you might not know is that Stephanie's official position is as director of Kickstarter's art program, and she acts somehow as an ambassador to the arts community, as sort of the intermediary, the agent that somehow engages with people in the visual arts and fine arts world, and how they use Kickstarter as a platform. Thanks a lot, Stephanie.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. So I was asked to talk about Kickstarter, the art program, our impact on the creative economy, creative industries. I'm going to do that to the best of my ability. So, Kickstarter is a website for funding creative projects, and it was founded by these three guys, Charles, Perry, and Yancey. It was Perry's idea. He came up with it in 2001 while trying to put together a music festival. Over the course of more years than I would have actually pursued an idea, he met Yancey and Charles, also creative types, and they hatched this scheme in 2009 that is now Kickstarter. Kickstarter is, let's see, button. There's now nearly 60 of us, or perhaps 60. I've been out of the office a week. So about 60 people who work at the organization. We continue to be very creatively driven. We are poets, we are artists, we are designers, we're filmmakers, philosophers, game designers. We are a very creative community who are sort of behind this thing. And every day at our office, the things that we ask ourselves is how can we continue to make more creative work in the world? That is the most important thing to us. It is why Kickstarter exists. It is not, the sort of overarching vision was that the bottom line in a new creative idea should be not how much money are you going to make on this, but how cool is this going to be? How impactful is this going to be? How is this going to drive creative vision forward? So since our launch in 2009, we've seen some pretty amazing numbers. Over 3.6 million people have pledged over $529 million to projects on Kickstarter. There's been over 37,000 successfully funded projects, probably 38 since I made this slide. So it's a very fast-growing community of people. We launched here in the UK actually in November, too. So to give you a sense of how that $529 million breaks down, you can see that film is actually the largest category in terms of dollars pledged. The film industry, independent filmmakers, documentary filmmakers, short filmmakers, it's just always been a place where people are really hungry and are really great and aggressive at pursuing their passions. You'll see that games is number 2, and something amazing that's happening with games is, again, it's independent game studios who've sort of figured out that this is a way to work directly for your fans, not work for publishers who are asking you for more first-person shooter games, but instead things that will engage the mind and sort of creativity of the people who are playing your games. To take another view of the Kickstarter numbers, this is how all those 37,000 plus projects breaks down. These are some of the top categories on site. You can see music is number 1. It's kind of a no-brainer that a musician can go to their fans and say, hey guys, I want to make my next record. Why don't we do it together? You give me a few bucks, I'll give you the record before anyone else gets it. I'll give you versions of the song that no one else will hear, things like that. You'll also notice that design and technology have dropped off this list, that games is nearly at the bottom. I like to say, as the director of the art program, of course I say this, that Kickstarter is really about the fine arts. So even in film and music, it is about these creative experiences, not these commercial experiences. And this is a really important slide because I'm about to show you some really huge numbers, so just keep this in mind. Kickstarter is about individuals, everyday people, people like me and you, with an idea and being able to throw it up on the site and raise some money towards realizing that idea. Most projects on Kickstarter are raising between $1,000 and $10,000. So 74% of projects. When Kickstarter first started, it launched in April 2009. This was kind of the first big moment on the site. This was a young woman named Allison Weiss in Atlanta, Georgia, or outside of Atlanta, Georgia. She wanted to make her next EP. She made this adorable video where she's in her kitchen, her laptop is like facing her, and she has her guitar and she's singing a song and saying, you know, hey guys, I want to make this EP, let's do it together. This was the first time on Kickstarter she was trying to raise $2,000. She shot past that within days, and she ended up raising over $7,000. And this was the first time that the founders of the site, the people who were working for the company at the time, realized that this was more than what they had thought it would be. Fast forward not too long. Sorry, my clicker skills aren't awesome, apparently. We saw this project happen. So this was a guy who'd been working in the industry for a while. He had this idea that he was shopping around to all the proper brands, you know, like Nike, et cetera, for this wristband that would be sort of a case for an iPod Nano. And everyone was like, that's terrible, no one wants that. So he had heard about this Kickstarter thing, so he went to the website, he launched this project, tried to raise, I think it was $10,000. He raised nearly $1 million. This changed everything. We've continued to see projects in different industries. So that was product design. This is games. This is music. Some of you may be familiar with Ouya, open source gaming platform. And most recently, this project is still live, Veronica Mars, so film. So we've seen these big industry changers happen on the site. Sort of creating this ripple effect both within their categories as well as across the entire site. With these blockbuster projects, there's been a lot of questions. Is this what Kickstarter needs to be? Do you need to be a big shot to work on Kickstarter? When in fact that's not the case. What we have seen is that these projects are creating this larger effect that's very important. So when Double Fine happened, we heard from a lot of game makers and they were like, what does this mean for the rest of us? And what we found out was it's pretty exciting. So this represents pledges to video game projects before Double Fine and after Double Fine. This number continues to be true. That $106 million for games, $100 million of it came in since Double Fine launched last year. The amazing news, and this is why I love working at Kickstarter, as a creative ecosystem, it's not just about games or art or film, it's about the entire website as a whole. So again, taking a look at how that Double Fine game impacted the entire site, all 13 categories, you can see quite a bit of money came in, quite a bit of pledges. These are all people who came to the site, first-time users for Double Fine, and then continued to explore, discover projects, pledge to projects, and have now probably pledged to many more. This was done like within a few weeks after Double Fine. So this is what we called the Double Fine effect. Those are the blockbusters, and those are important to understand when we're talking about how we're changing the industry. But I think it's also really important to understand how it's really these tiny visions, these small moments that people have that were otherwise impossible, things that would never get off the ground, never get funded, that are happening on site. And it's not just about money, it's about raising awareness and building community around your ideas. So we're seeing people designing spacesuits. People who are making bus maps and walking maps and all sorts of maps for their local city. When their city is kind of failing, they're stepping up to the plate. People who are making open fonts, open web fonts and regular fonts. This is a group of people who made a font for their city, which is now, you can see it in the bike lanes and on their street signs. People who are responding to the news. So after the Gulf oil spill in the United States recently, this is someone wanted to go down to New Orleans and make a map of it because it was a no-fly zone. No one could take pictures of what was actually going on. He devised this balloon mapping kit that would be able to float a balloon and a cheap camera over the spill and take those pictures and then stitch them together to create the only aerial photograph of that spill. Which is what the news ended up having to use when they were reporting on it. People who are creating these devices that are traveling the ocean to collect data, to create open data sets that anyone can use to write about what's going on in our ocean. People who, again, in response to the tragedy in Japan a few years ago, distributing Geiger counters, realizing that the Geiger counter industry had stalled and kind of sucked, and redesigning how we make Geiger counters and how we share that data. People, James George is the presenter here this weekend, people who are working on open source toolkits for rethinking of how we make videos and explore videos. And people who are collaborating, artists, technologists, together to find new ways to distribute creative content. So this is a project that just happened, art book publisher collaborating with a couple of artists and technologists. We've also learned that people don't just think in terms of categories, so we think in terms of topics. So we rolled out this tagging system. This is civic projects, for instance, so you could look at projects from across all those categories, across all those cities that are civic. And then we also have fun ways of looking at that too. So Cthulhu is a theme on the site, and we've seen that across all categories. So parting thoughts. For me, every day I look at Kickstarter and talk to artists about how Kickstarter works and what it is about. And these are the three things I tell them. It's about generosity. It's about people coming on the site saying, I have an idea and I want to share it with you. It's about building community around that idea. And it's about transparency. I mean, it's inviting people into the creative process in a way that we haven't really done in this big public way before. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie. And our final presentation is by Kevin Holmes. Kevin is Managing Director at Creators Project, which personally I have to say I found a really intriguing organization and much harder to define in the sense that it overlaps many different spaces from distribution to curation to event production, and that in the last 3 years has also created a very specific space for itself, mostly in the world of new media and new media art, and is probably a model for institutions, new models of institutions that don't really overlap with the traditional structures. Thanks a lot, Kevin.
Thank you. Yeah, so before I discuss what we're about and what it is we do, I'm just going to play a little video that shows the sort of projects we've been involved with and the kind of events we've been putting on over the last 3 years. So yeah, have a look at that and
people that come to the Creators Project are ready to become really open-minded. This moment of discovery and their minds opening up is really satisfying.
Best day of my life.
My group as technologists, I've pulled a lot out of the engagement with the artists over this year. Important pieces of inspiration that we'll continue to take forward, not only for art and technology series, but it'll wind up being technology that's important for computers in the future.
Although I was super interested in the kind of organic analog side of creation, I was also really intrigued as to how the computer can really enhance what you can do with your own hands, you know.
Technology allows access to amazing things you can create with, you know, like computers. And I'm doing things I could have never done 10 years ago.
Right, okay, so I'm just going to give a bit of background about what we're about. So the initial idea behind the Creators Project was to kind of look at a new way to celebrate the intersection of art and technology and to create a new sort of model for supporting contemporary creativity on a global scale. And this manifested itself in a blog, a web video series, a traveling event series, a studio program which works with artists to develop new work, and as well as meetups, panels, and an online gallery where a community can display their work. And what we did is we looked at the artistic disciplines that exist, like art, film, design, architecture, and music, and we took inspiration from them to build a platform that sort of bridges the gap and showcases them all together as just a creative kind of venture, and it allowed a place for kind of positive discussion about these works. So if you wanted to look at a kind of theme of what we do, it's about how technology and specifically computers have revolutionized the arts and the creative process. So looking at how it's democratized it, how anyone can make a film or an album on their laptop these days, and how it's brought about new modes of creative expression where artists are using code as a tool to create kind of incredible and beautiful artworks. And the Creators Project is a platform that showcases this particular spectrum of artists and the work that they do. And also, as well as this, the idea was to address the challenges and benefits that the digital era presents to us with regards to distribution of artworks and how we engage and consume the media that these artists create. So in that way it became a multi-tier project with the website and the video series, but as well as the virtual component that everyone can access via the internet, we had the more human component of the travelling event series and the workshop, so people could experience these artworks face-to-face, as it were. People often ask about the partnership with Intel, and the way it works is we see it as a kind of non-traditional form of marketing. It's not about putting a logo on every piece of artwork or anything like that, and instead Intel wanted to kind of add value by creating an initiative to support artists and create a platform to distribute content and works to a broader audience, and that's a really key element of it, is reaching a kind of broader audience with these artworks. And it's also about supporting emerging artists like a rapper from Brazil called Emicida and a Korean film director called Lumpins, and Intel are able to help them out and give them the support that they may otherwise have not received, not just in the form of things like hardware that Intel obviously can show, but then giving them opportunities outside of the Creators Project and continuing to support them throughout their career. And for Intel, it means that their engineers can work with artists, can work with like small studios and help them in any challenges they may face. And they can offer their expertise, and they can also allow these artists to play with any new products that might not be on the market yet, and they can get feedback from that, and it can give Intel some valuable insight from a new group of people who aren't using this technology for education or business purposes, but they're using it to create stuff. So, a lot about what we do is to support artists, and as I mentioned earlier, we support them through something called the Studio, which is our production arm, and it basically works by artists pitch us ideas, and if they secure funding, then we help them to realise their vision. Basically, they come to us generally with ideas that might not have been appropriate for other organisations, or they might not have been able to get support for it because it may have been a bit more experimental, or it may have crossed over these kind of disciplines. And so that our organisation allows them to realise the work, and they can have complete ownership of their work. So, and then what we do is we help distribute it through the events if it's a physical installation, or through the website if it's like a video or a short film or an interactive film, which we've worked on as well. And we also help by creating documentaries around it, showing behind the scenes and how this work was created and the creative process behind it, and also the blog where we can do Q&As with the artists and with the teams that help them realise their works. And because, as I said, the artists here, the Creators Project, is a kind of place for innovation, so they come to us with non-traditional ideas. For instance, Karen O from the AAS came to us with what she called a psycho opera, which she was kind of a pet project of hers, I suppose, which she'd been nurturing for about 7 years. And it involved a little bit of music, a little bit of theatre. So I should have flipped through these from them. And a little bit of film. So you see different elements come into play. And also another project we did, which was at Coachella in 2011, was Jonathan Glazer and Jay Spaceman from Spiritualized. They made Spiritualized track, Ladies and Gentlemen, We're Floating in Space, into a kind of ethereal light and sound installation that people could experience. So it's through a combination of like access to technology, the financial support, and the multidisciplinary approach of the Creators Project that we've created a platform that allows these artworks to flourish. So as well as this kind of production arm of the project, we also see the Creators Project as a place for people to discover this type of work. So as well as supporting this community that already exists around this, we also want to introduce people to this community. So the gateway, the Creators Project becomes a sort of gateway for this kind of work and for this type of expression. And we like to think that there's an openness to our events and our approach. All ages come along to the events. We've had like children come along to these, and all backgrounds, whether it's kind of academics or experts, or you're an artist yourself, or you know nothing about this type of work and you just want to come and check it out and find out what it's all about. And then hopefully, because of the democratic nature now of creation, that you know, maybe it can inspire somebody to create a work of art that may not have otherwise wanted to, and also inspire new artists and emerging artists, and inspire the established artists too. They might see something on our site, and they might see an artist's work on one of our profiles, and they might think, oh, you know, they want to collaborate them or something like that, and they can contact them. So we hope it kind of generates and kind of like fuels this kind of community, and also inspires the audience to search out this type of work, and you know, explore new genres and new experiences they may not have otherwise come into contact with. And hopefully, you know, at a time when funding is getting harder and harder for the arts, that it might inspire other brands to take a similar approach to the one that we've taken. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for the presentations and also for doing your homework and allowing ourselves the luxury to get to the conversation, which in 1 hour wasn't easy. We're going to open the floor for comments. I'm going to use my status as a host just to make the first one. And I'm going to bring I was going to say not dirty, but let's say problematic word, the C word, curation, because I think three projects that have somehow internalized the logic of curation to some extent. I mean, Kickstarter handpicks according to some principles, the projects that are going to be crowdfunded. Vimeo has been defined by Jeremy also as a platform that is a daily film festival and approached that way. And definitely Creators Project has also used that principle. And there are quite a good number of curators in this room, I'm sure. So it's both interesting and problematic and complicated the way that curation has become also a structural principle in what otherwise could just have been neutral platforms. I mean, just enabling platforms. So I was interested in a way, what was your take on how this is an integral part of what you do? How does that relate to traditional curation? And actually, is that also disintermediation curation as a field of practice in a way, or we are just maybe using a word that doesn't really completely neatly identify what we previously understood for curation? Sorry for the long question.
How do you want this to work? Should we just go down the
line?
Well, Vimeo is a completely open platform. We use our staff picks and the other things that we do as a way of encouraging the community and fueling the community to continue to what they do and to elevate stuff that may not have gotten seen otherwise in a completely open democratic way. It's an interesting question. I think that there are so many different curators on our platform ourselves that have their own channels, have their own ways of showing their work. And the way that Vimeo works is like every member is also a curator, because if you follow a creator online on Vimeo, if you follow their likes, you're starting to see what they like and you can start to be exposed to more work. So it has become a very organic kind of thing. And the staff picks channel, I think, is just more of like a kick, like pushing that engine forward. in that way. I think curation is something that maybe the word is not right anymore, like you said. I don't know what a proper word would be, but there's a need for a lot of people who don't have a lot of time to have stuff sifted for them in terms of presentation of things bubbling up.
To keep it short, everything that Jeremy just said is true on Kickstarter. I will add, it's an interesting question for us. We do talk about how we can continue to scale without without our selection process that we currently use. Is that possible? And also, the question came up the other day: should we do away with staff picks altogether? I was the only one at the table that was like, "No, we need staff picks." Everyone else was like, "Really? Let's talk about it," which I thought was actually really interesting. For various reasons, but I do believe that it's kind of a nice way to highlight things that you wouldn't otherwise find.
Yeah, so I suppose for us, curation, we have the blog, which is kind of editorialized, and obviously we decide on that what we want to show. But a lot of the time for us, like, artists come to us with ideas, with what they want to make, and it comes, so the curation happens kind of naturally in that regards. And we try to look at ideas that are kind of, innovative or really quite out there, and go with those. But a lot of the stuff we do, the pitches come from all the people involved in the Creators Project, the whole team involved with it. So it is a strange one, like Jeremy said. I don't know if curation is the right way to talk about what these, how these things work, because it works in quite a kind of, there's a lot of people involved in it, so there's a lot of minds kind of thinking about what we can cover, what we should cover, and it's a kind of back and forth like that kind of ends up with what we actually show. And, obviously the creators that we support, or the creators that we've made videos of, are the creators that we support when we do the event series and things like that. So that's kind of decided like that. So yeah, it's a strange one, but there's elements of curation there, but it's kind of mixed up with kind of editorial as well, and elements like that.
We have mics on the room, so it's time for questions for anybody who wants to put in comments, ideas, rebate principles. Yeah? Yes.
Hi, I'm Anna. I just wanted to thank you all for great presentations, really inspiring. I haven't quite worked this out in my head yet, but it really strikes me that the kind of scale that you're discussing here in terms of the amount of projects that you're supporting on Kickstarter, the amount of work that's coming through Vimeo, the scale of production of the Creators Project, really represents something of a complete kind of quantum leap in the way that we're thinking about digital art and digital culture, which, until relatively recently was a fairly niche game. And I think all of you in some respects have probably participated in the niches, as I have, and as this conference very much used to be an exemplar of. And I guess I just wanted to ask what your thoughts are of, kind of how your platforms and your experiences have helped take what used to be a kind of a sort of a niche genre really into a completely different audience, to a completely different scale, and whether or not that's something that you perceive happening or if that's just in my head.
I think that's sort of what I was trying to talk about a little today, and that the experience of being inside of Kickstarter and watching this incredible explosion, I think it's taking, I come from a very niche defined art world, and the experience of going to something that is more about a broader cultural experience, about taking sort of these like private, very arty moments and putting them into the public. I talk to dancers and visual artists, people who are traditionally working in very fine margins, who talk about the experience of putting their work on Kickstarter is so enlightening. To take something into the public in this way is not something that we have done as artists before. And I think that those numbers that we're seeing are an incredible, it's for me, it's incredibly inspiring and motivating to know that what I'm doing is not it doesn't just matter to the people in this room, but in fact matters to a larger public, for sure.
I would say exactly the same thing, but I also think that we're living in a time where maybe we're seeing the end of broadcast and maybe seeing the end of just one direction, like one voice to mass. Instead, we're seeing many to many, and what that has done is has enabled maybe a term that was been thrown around of niche casting, where you basically have a dedicated audience that will follow a principle and become advocates, and like Kickstarter will put money into it to make sure that they see what they like happen. One of my favorite things that I heard at the TED conference recently was the Amanda Palmer talk, where she talks about how the traditional industry, when she came around with her second album, she sold 25,000 copies of her second album. They thought that was a failure. And so she thought to herself that there must have been more to that. And people at her gigs started giving her money, started giving her $10 here or there because they had copied her album or gotten her music in one way or another. So she turned to Kickstarter and raised over 1.2 million, I think, or something along those lines, but from 25,000 people. So I think that's a very interesting kind of shift now, where it doesn't take many, many people to have an effect on culture in that way.
Yeah, I'd completely agree with that. I mean, the thing is with the things like the internet, it's allowed anyone to kind of make something, and if they want to post it to Vimeo and it gets a staff pick or something like that, and you get, you suddenly get millions of views. Anyone can do that. Anyone can make that and submit it. So I think the idea of like niche audiences is kind of evolving and changing, and there isn't any niches, because it seems like everything's a niche now, or there's so many different things people can do, and a lot of the artists we work with, it's a very multidisciplinary approach to work now. You're not just a filmmaker or, a kind of, you don't just make installations or whatever. You do everything, or you make video games and you make films, or you do projection mapping, and so there's this kind of people are doing, their skills are going wider. So I think that in that way, since we started, I think there's been a change in people's attitude to the sort of work that we show, and like people working with code and things like that. That's happening a lot nowadays, and you see it in music videos, and like again through things like Vimeo, these people get to see the music videos. You don't need an MTV, or you don't need a broadcaster to show them on a popular TV show to get a big audience anymore. You've got that big audience online, so. It does change people's attitudes and what people consider kind of niche art, I suppose.
I have a question comparing, my name is James, and thank you guys for being here. It's really cool to hear these three together. This is like an amazing historical moment, I think. But I have a question. I noticed something in the metrics from the Vimeo to the Kickstarter, and the Vimeo presentation was about the metrics of views, sort of the sharing, and that's really what Vimeo is founded on. And then Kickstarter came up with sort of monetary money built into it, like it's about funding, it's about sort of a caring model. Mm-hmm. And so I actually have a question on the Vimeo side. How have you seen the tip jar working? Mm-hmm. And will there be sort of successful metrics that you see? Have you a feeling, or is there a problem or a challenge converting your culture to somebody where people are actually opening up their pocketbooks?
That's a really interesting question, and something that we've been talking internally about. I think tip jar is too young right now to be able to say that. I think it needs some time to mature. I do think we drew an analogy internally of, if you have tip jar and you have now Vimeo on demand, they're kind of like all the elements that the App Store allowed people to have. to create apps. And when the App Store came out, I don't think anybody thought that there was this immense burst of creativity of how to talk directly to your audience. We think that, you know, with all these tools, we're going to see new types of distribution that we couldn't even think about. You know, we tried to give as much flexibility as possible for people to earn money from their work, and we think that that's going to be the really interesting thing. You know, when it starts to break down from what is traditional models and new models occur, that's, you know, what I hope that I'll come back in a year or two and tell you all about that.
Hi, my name is Damian Smith. I actually work for the Cabinet Office, but just a quick question to all of you. How do you resolve the tension between staying true to your mission and competing channels for distribution? Because, for example, take Vimeo for example. Like Vimeo against say YouTube. Mm-hmm. It's just like how do you resolve that?
We stay true to our mission to create the best tools possible and to encourage the creative community that we have online. If you look at all the comments, for example, on our site versus the comments on YouTube, you start to see the difference in that kind of way. We were built as a creative tool, but now because of on-demand and everything else, we're seeing many more feature filmmakers coming to sell their work, and it's going to switch to a much more viewing economy on the site. We like to stick to our guns of quality, control, and creativity, and that we feel are going to be more. That we feel is much more important to us in that way.
Yeah, it's funny because I think the thing that you set up as a contrast is actually the thing that it makes it work. I mean, the fact that we have a mission, right? We've actually only started talking about this idea of mission recently, but that's really what it is. We're not like looking at competitors and thinking about how to keep pace. We're really like looking internally, this idea of creating more projects in the world, right? So that's it. That's it for us at the end of the day, every day.
Yeah, and I think us with our competitors, I mean, there isn't a massive amount of kind of websites that do exactly what we do, but there's obviously sites that cover similar concepts to us, but you know that you kind of share a similar audience, I suppose, so people go to all the websites, you know, and they show our content, and you know, you can build up partnerships with websites that are similar to you, and it's all part of the community anyway. I think, you know, it's not like we're competing with you know, a lot of websites these days have their own kind of appeal, and people go to see different things on different sites, and I think, you know, we've just hopefully figured out a kind of our own kind of place within that. And so, you know, you're always gonna have competitors to a degree, but you know, it's always been that way. But yeah, like these guys said, you just got to continue to do what you set out to do, and hopefully people will see that and come to you for those reasons.
Hi, my name's Steve, and I'm either a user or a consumer of all of your platforms, and it is a great opportunity to listen about them. I guess a little bit following up on the mission question, it seems to me that part of the real potential of these platforms is the long tail, and a lot of the metrics are looking at the major usages, and I would just both encourage you and ask you, how are you developing tools that are doing what, in your version, in your mission version, in Amazon, or that allows people to find other things that might be of interest to them besides staff picks, besides already the followers? How do you make that long tail possible, which seems to me to be the really critical innovation that these platforms allow?
So in my attempt to do the short answer, I didn't talk about what we do in terms of discovery. So we think a lot about discovery. So when Kickstarter first launched, the homepage was just staff picks. About a year ago, we changed the homepage so that the first thing you see is a staff pick, and it's something that we're very excited about. But then after that, it's a row of projects that are popular, so things that other people are excited about. After that is people in your area, so whether you've opted in and told us where you live, or we just look at where your computer is and we'll tell you what's around you. And then finally it's social, and this is something that not a lot of people have signed up for, but I will tell you it is how I discover most of my projects. And Steve, I think we're socially connected on Kickstarter. So when you back a project, I get a notification, and then I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What is that? I almost always click on those notifications. And we are continuing to build, thinking about discovery. What is the personalized experience? What is the social experience? How are people discovering each other? And this is why the question of should we eliminate staff picks, because people work so hard. They want to be, how do we get featured by Kickstarter, when we actually don't think that that is where it's at. We think it is about communities discovering and supporting each other.
I mean, I would agree with all of that. I mean, our like button, like I mentioned beforehand, is works in the same sort of way, and I think that has been how I've discovered most of the stuff on Vimeo before, like, it's popped up on staff picks or anything like that. I go to all the creators that I like, and I follow their work, and I follow what they like, and that has become a more accurate feed to me of what's going on in the community in that kind of way.
I mean, for us, we don't have like a staff picks as such, but we have like the blog where we showcase work, and you can discover work from there. And you know, we tweet stuff that we find interesting on the internet and things like this, and so in that regards, that's how you can discover stuff through us, and also through the video content. We've now got a YouTube channel as well, and the artists on there, you know, there's a whole bunch of artists on there to discover, and the people they talk about as well. So, you know,
we might have time for the last question, and I shouldn't be doing this, but okay.
Hi. Obviously, you kind of have a lot of, well, the Vimeo and Kickstarter. You have a lot of users, and I think you mentioned a couple of like kind of more personal stories that you kind of picked out as the ones that you think are particular success stories. And I just wonder, with so many users, and how do you draw out your kind of, how do you get that personal level of involvement, and how often do you do it, and why do you do it with particular projects and not others?
The projects that I picked were more just to show the impact in versus the traditional model. That was part of our conversation here. But we get notes every day, multiple notes, and we call them Lovio internally, because we see people's lives have dramatically changed from the exposure that they get online, and not necessarily anything to do with staff picks whatsoever. It's more to do with the tool enabling them to express themselves and to get their work seen. And for us, that's the stuff that is really drives us forward. Of course, when you're doing a presentation like this, you want to show things that have impact that can translate across medium. But I think it's more about that. It's more about how that happens. And we have a staff of people who just watch the site all the time, and our support staff. And the difference, I think, between us and other video platforms is the people behind in the staff who are constantly on top of everything in that kind of way.
Yeah, and what a great question. Thank you for this question. Same. I would say an advantage to the fact that we have a submissions process means that we do see every single project that launches on site, which means that there is a project review team who are noting things as they launch. There is someone who looks at our activity feed, so every single thing that happens on site, whether it's a launch, a comment, an update, whatever, he keeps an eye on that thread, and then at the end of the day distributes an email to all of us to tell us what we missed possibly, and we all, of course, email him. And then I was saying this earlier, I think more than anything, I'm a Kickstarter super user. So I've backed 225 projects on site, mostly for $1 to $5. And it's mostly about being part of that experience. And I feel like I've become very close to a lot of these projects. So these stories that I shared with you are almost all projects that I've personally backed, and I've watched those stories sort of emerge as they've happened. And I would say that is the sort of unexpected and delightful outcome of participating in a Kickstarter project.
Okay, so we don't really have time for more. I have like 3,000 more questions. Like I would really have like to talk about the problems and what means using specific metrics like funding and how that impacts on the process and how it's perceived. Also, I would like to talk about the logic of events, the fact that Creators Project is a platform that also does events. Vimeo does a festival, and how one thing goes against the other. And maybe we can keep on having this conversation in the cafe. But I have to hand it over to Drew, who's going to make an announcement. Thanks a lot for the three of you, and thanks for this amazing panel.